My idiot senses are tingling. I hear some bullshit. Smells like it too. Affirmative action for white people has always existed, called legacy preference. And the bullshit, it comes in the form of a Mike article. Can't say I didn't expect this one. Let's be real. But let's give Mike the benefit of the doubt, why don't we? Documents obtained by the New York Times suggest the Trump administration has plans to allocate Department of Justice resources towards suing universities whose admissions officers use intentional race-based discrimination against white people. Intentional race discrimination meaning affirmative action, I assume. An action or policy favoring those who tend to suffer from discrimination, especially in relation to employment or education, aka positive discrimination. You know, the positive discrimination that became legal in 1961 that, for some reason, wasn't overturned 3 years later in 1964 when, get this, the Civil Rights Act was passed, which, get this, outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and or national origin. The irony of that statement is just so delicious. Just, it needs a little bit of salt. But as a former U.S. Department of Education employee reminded Mike, the country's universities already have a system in place that heavily favors white students and has for centuries. It's called legacy preference. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of this article and I start calling out the author for blatant neglect of the nuance in the subject she's only just scratched the surface of, I have to outright make a few disclaimers. College admission processes are absolutely wacky, my dudes. Rigged and sometimes demeaning. Let's be clear. College admission boards are where pride, pure loyalty, and laziness go to die. It's everyone for themselves in the cold, hard boardroom of the selective higher educators. It's the most important application of your life, and sometimes you pay the colleges in terms of application fees for the opportunity to be rejected by said institution. I'm not even kidding. I paid Ohio State $60 just for the chance to be rejected. I'm a little bit bitter about it. As if Riley J. Dennis had a leg to stand on when it comes to getting pissy about being rejected by someone for being trans. At least it didn't cost Riley the price of a preseason cast iron skillet on Amazon. There's the salt I'm looking for. Anywho, college admissions are jacked for any number of reasons. From the amount of paperwork you have to submit, such as your application, your essay, your letters of recommendation, your volunteer hours, your resume, your SAT/ACT scores, your FAFSA, all that jazz. But not even just that, you have to get down on bended knees, groveling before the ivory tower to suck its dick to prove yourself worthy of a position in that school, which is a fancy way of saying you have to make yourself look attractive as fuck to them with your extracurriculars, your test scores, your GPA, your volunteer hours, everything. It's like you're trying to immigrate to the US, honestly. Those colleges want to know that you are bringing something to the table to make them look good, so you have to make yourself look good by default. But why do you have to do this when you're applying for college? Well, because money reasons. The better the school looks in terms of overall GPA, extracurricular opportunities, community outreach, the more students want to come to your school, and then the more money the school gets. And that's not even to approach the topic of sports recruits, which, and especially D1 schools, bring in lots of donor monies. Those D1 sports recruits are the bane of every academic overachiever's existence. Bitches be taking all the scholarship monies with the little to no merit to show for it. I'm not bitter, it's fine. Make no mistake, getting into college is a bitch if you don't have all the right qualifiers. And it's certainly not for the lazy, which is good because it's a sort of vetting process for, those people who don't want to do the work and go the extra mile to get it, what they need in life, as opposed to those who do. Getting into college, applying for college is like one giant popularity contest, and if James the quarterback has bigger boobs than you, then you might as well wear a bag over your face for all of the notice that you will get. My saltiness aside, I really look forward to the author's statistical data that proves the legacy preference is 100% irrefutably an advantage that white people have. Because I would really like to know something that I already don't know. And if they don't have the data, then that means that I am the only one who brought data to the table. And I'm just going to go ahead and lay it on ya. According to the Princeton study, the bonus for African American applicants is roughly equivalent to an extra 230 SAT points on a 1,600-point scale to 185 points for Hispanics, 200 points for athletes, and 160 points for children of alumni. The Asian disadvantage is comparable to a loss of 50 SAT points. I'm glad that I bring this up. Yes, I am. I'm very glad that I bring this up. Children of alumni get less points added onto the SAT as opposed to African American student applicants. The largest admission preferences are conferred on applicants who have SAT scores above 1400, who are African American or Hispanic, and who are athletes or legacies. Which automatically proves how full of shit you are. No contest, that's the video. Bye guys, I need not continue.
I don't even have time to tell you how wrong you are. Actually, it's gonna bug me if I don't.
Plus, I wrote a whole 4,000 words on how wrong you are, and if I don't say them on camera, then I'm just gonna be like, sitting in a corner, rocking myself back and forth in the fetal position. Essentially, legacy is by no means the only thing that will give you priority over others in the admissions process, but it is one of the least controversial things when compared to nepotism in the case of D1 recruitment players and friggin' positive discrimination. You want to talk about discrimination versus legacy status? Which one sounds worse, honestly? Now, for anyone who will say that there could be possible bribery involved in legacy preference students, bribery can be involved in any aspect of life, not just in legacy cases, not just in college, not just in politics, not just in law, anywhere. Legacy preference or legacy admission is the common practice of admissions officers giving priority to applicants with relatives who have attended the university. Affirmative action, which became law in 1961, has been just one way to counteract it. And that, my friends, is what one would call some grade A misclassification of bullshit as chocolate fudge. As we established earlier, with the above statistics from Princeton University, the bonus for African American applicants is roughly equal to an extra 230 SAT points on the SAT, while the bonus for children of alumni is only 160 points. So if it were a correction or a counteraction, it would be an over-counteraction or an overcorrection. That is an overcorrection of at least 70 points. And that, my friends, is what one would call some grade A misclassification of bullshit as chocolate fudge. Because you see, the thing is, affirmative action at its core is to correct past injustices by implementing policies that favor those previously discriminated against. It's a way to counter-discriminate for race, gender, creed, and the like by implementing discrimination of race, gender, creed, and such into the system. It counters discrimination by discriminating in an even more emphasized way. Legacy has nothing to do whatsoever with any of this. Institutions that use legacy admissions are those that have historically enrolled upper-middle-class white people, mostly men. David Bergerson, Senior Fellow for Post-Secondary Education at American Progress, said Wednesday in a phone interview. Bergerson served as acting assistant secretary for post-secondary education at the U.S. Department of Education under President Barack Obama until 2013. The students who get legacy preference are going to be the children or grandchildren of that demographic. That's going to result in that institution being predominantly white and middle class unless there's a positive action from the institution to change that. When asked if he considered legacy preference inherently discriminatory, Bergerson said, "Yes, I would." Well, here's the thing. This is a lot more nuanced than just simply Whitey gets the diploma by default. There's just so much wrong with that oversimplification, so let me break it down for you, because you've done essentially what is the verbal equivalent of lightly caressing several issues that take place in this debacle, Mr. Bergerson, from household income to race to education and so on. And I need to tackle them one at a time in order to make them make sense as a whole. So your argument, Mr. Bergerson, is that legacy admission equals middle-class white people, which is discriminatory. This is, of course, not true, and I can explain it right off the bat, but I'm going to take a very, very long time to explain it to you in such graphic detail that your head will spin, as it did mine when I was going through the numbers. Consider legacy admissions as discriminatory in favor of white people. 100% of the legacy students admitted would have to be white, otherwise it's not discriminatory. And as you have yet to cite a statistic that states that 100% of the legacy admits to colleges are white, that counters my earlier study from Princeton. I'm assuming that such a thing is not the case, otherwise that would have been the first thing in this article. Furthermore, as you use the word predominantly when making your statement, I'm going to assume that you already were aware of that fact. Now, where we disagree is that it's a systematically intentional issue. I don't think it is, and here's why. It's just a statistical imbalance that's a result of a few major factors, and I'm going to explain all of them in detail so that there's no disconnect. Now let me spoon feed you guys some rapid fire info, my dudes. A rather obvious one is the fact that most of the people that live within the United States happen to be white. That's 223,553,265 people, or 72.4% of the population, as of a study in 2010, if you were wondering. So no shit, these institutions enrolled majority white people. Could that perhaps be skewing the data? I hope you just forgot to take that juicy negative information into account, because it's a big one that innocently explains half of your claim away. But if that's not good enough, let's break this down. How many of the people in certain demographics actually enroll in college? Or are college undergraduate students predominantly white? The answer is yes. According to a study done in 2008, of the 16,345,738 students enrolled in college in that year, 10,339,216 were of the Caucasian persuasion. That's just a hair over 63%. The number of black students was 2,269,284. The number of Hispanic students being 2,103,524, etc. I could go on, but I'm not going to. Link is in the description if you need to see those numbers for yourself. Now, of course, that was roughly 10 years ago, and we are due for an update sometime soon in the next couple years. But as you'll see from the data, there seems to be consistent growth of the number of students from each demographic. The numbers go up, not down. And I would also venture to say that based on these percentage distributions, which seem to be going in the upwards direction, that minority groups are actually improving in terms of enrollment over the years. The gap is narrowing slowly, but surely, so well done. So, question, what happens after you go to college? Well, typically you start a career, usually one that's based on your degree. Of course, you can pursue a higher degree, but for the sake of the argument, let's say 4 years is enough. So what happens when you have a career? You make money. It's not rocket science, unless your career is rocket science, in which case, then it most certainly is rocket science. And boom! Just like that, there's a nice colorful graph that shows the median usual weekly earnings of full-time wage and salary workers aged 25 and older by educational attainment 2014 annual averages. Holy fuck, that is a mouthful. Don't worry, I'll make it simpler. As you can probably see, based on the graph, the colors all the way to the left are a lot less than the colors all the way to the right.
You want the numbers, Mason. That's all we've ever wanted.
Okay. If graphs aren't your thing, you need to see hard, cold facts and data and numbers and shit. I have a nice chart with numbers for you. As we know, typically people with higher levels of education make more money than those with little or no education. I say typically, understanding all of the full context and factors that would definitely change that. And here in front of you is the evidence that supports that. For the sake of brevity and not to get muddled by numbers and stats, we'll be using totals of all demographics, because otherwise this video would be a lot longer. For less than a high school diploma, the earnings are $488 weekly. That's $25,376 annually, assuming they work 52 weeks out of the year. The same goes for the rest of these numbers, by the way. For high school graduates, no college, $668 weekly. That's $34,736 annually. For some college or associate degree, $761, or $39,572 annually. And finally, for bachelor's degree only, $1,101, or $57,252 annually. This is all before tax. We'll get there. Holy fuck, we are about to enter the math segment of this video, which I cannot ever seem to escape nowadays. I need a fun little graphic for when I do this to combat the urge to jump off a cliff. But I digress. So buckle down, guys. We're about to budget that income based on averages. Assuming you stick with this data and use the budget the Bureau of Labor Statistics has put out as of 2015 for a married couple with children and are the most conservative possible with your expenditures. Let me just put this all into a nice little graphic for you, because I'm sure as hell that you guys don't want to hear me do all of this math out loud for you in front of the camera. Now, see what I did here was I took all of the data, the annual income based on educational level that I calculated from the weekly averages. On the second level, I removed 12% for taxes. On the third level, I removed 82% from the new number for budgeting reasons. The same budgeting statistics that the Bureau of Labor Statistics presented. The leftover was for savings. The savings I multiplied by 18 years, for the total of which can be seen on the last level of bars, which is the number of years that you would ideally save up for college for one child from birth. Now, the numbers are presented here as ideally saved over that time period as $72,500 $352 for less than high school diploma, $99,039 for high school diploma, $112,827 for some college no degree, $163,236 for a bachelor's degree. Now that I've given you these numbers, let me do you a favor, Mike Journalist and Mr. Bergerson, and put them into some perspective for you out of the goodness out of my heart. You might say, that's a lot of money. Yes, it is. Unless you're looking at the average current total price for room and board over a 4-year period at an in-state college, which is $98,440. Now, that is the minimum average before scholarship money is applied, of course. These numbers are rough estimates and averages. The savings I calculated most certainly don't take into account various factors that would vastly adjust them, such as tax returns, vacation leisure spending, and emergency expenditures, etc. Things that would ideally alter the total final number. I acknowledge that, but since we are dealing with this in such a broad, all-encompassing manner, it's the most ideal assessment. But also remember that these numbers take into account only one person's salary in a household where there lives a married couple with children. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would I calculate it that way? That seems preposterous. Well, I'll tell you, because I thought it would encompass the lowest common denominator of household incomes while still encompassing the greatest number of average family units, as the majority of children do in fact live in a 2-parent household at 96% according to studies. Why does any of this matter? Well, because what is the single most common factor that exists in all cases where legacy students get preferential treatment? And this one should be obvious. One or both of the parents would have had to have gone to college, specifically the college their son or daughter applied to, but since we're doing a broad analysis, they at least had to go to college. And we know that of the 4 educational levels I mentioned earlier, the one that makes the most money is the college graduate with a bachelor's degree. Thus, logic stands to reason that those people can better afford to send their kid to college as opposed to the no high school diploma salary parents, which means that on the most basic fundamental levels of understanding of these numbers, you would have had to have gone to college to be more likely to send your own kid to college. Duh. Which brings me to the middle class discussion, which will be short and relatively math-free, thank God. If you went to college and are making the average college graduate bachelor's degree salary of $57,252, congratulations to you, you have made the middle class. So what have we learned today, kids? White people are the majority race in the US. White people are the predominant race enrolled in college in the US. People whose parents have a bachelor's degree or higher can better afford to send their kid to college. People who also have a bachelor's degree or higher are more likely to be middle class. Hence, legacy students are predominantly white and middle class. You know, I'm starting to see why people discount nuances so often. That was the level of analysis handholding that I would use to explain paradoxical theory to a toddler. I know I'm too young, but I need a drink of something. Anything. Anything at all. I don't care. Ugh. I like it, but I hate it. So knowing all of this, how can you still make the argument that legacy preference is based on racial discrimination? Because what you've said is that legacy is on par with affirmative action, which is inherently discriminatory. According to a 2011 study from researchers at Harvard University, an institution that practices legacy preference itself, legacy applicants got a 23.3 percentage point increase of their probability of admission, just by virtue of their legacy status. If an applicant was a primary legacy, meaning one or both of their parents had attended the same institution, the percentage point increase went up to 45.1. That same year, the Harvard Crimson published a piece revealing legacy applicants to Harvard had an acceptance rate of 30%, more than 4 times that of a non-legacy applicant. Let me tell you something, a little secret that most of the college student body, the admissions office, and the alumni community already know. The reason legacy students get admitted at such a high rate is because the colleges like to maintain that connection with graduated students, as typically alumni are the biggest donors. You see, I go to a school with a high rate of legacy students. My aunt went to my school back in the day, now her son does. I have 2 second cousins who went there also. This kind of thing at my school is not unheard of. The fact is, it's kind of the norm. The new gym and the food hall and heck most of the resources on campus are alumni donor funded. If a building has a name that sounds like a last name, then it's usually a generous gift from some graduated family. On top of that, a good portion of my merit scholarships are financed by alumni donors. So of course, admittance of legacy students is elevated. Colleges want that sweet, sweet donor monies. And you know what? So do the students, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to fund our educations. So it's less about race and more about money. Still kind of iffy, but still not race. In 2006, ProPublica editor Daniel Goldman wrote an entire book on how the rich buy their underachieving children's way in the country's top universities. A classic example he noted was the story of Jared Kushner, whose father donated $2.5 million to Harvard just before his admission. His GPA did not warrant it. His SAT scores did not warrant it. A former official at Kushner's high school told Golden, "We thought for sure there was no way this was going to happen. Then lo and behold, Jared was accepted. It was a little bit disappointing because there were, at the time, other kids we thought should really get in on the merits, and they did not." And that's the problem, isn't it? People getting into a university based on something other than merit. Don't you get it? We're on the same side. We want people to be accepted into university based on their achievements, not mommy and daddy's money, and most certainly not their skin color. You're trying to make a small-scale bribery issue about race to mitigate an actual substantial race issue. The bribery issue is one all on its own, but make no mistake, it is not a race issue, as is the case with affirmative action. I do admit, though, the bribery thing, it should be rectified, but so should the affirmative action thing. The idea that an unqualified student might take the place of a more deserving one is a common anxiety associated with affirmative action. It's what drove Abigail Fisher, after being rejected from the University of Texas at Austin, to bring a suit against the UT school system, all the way to the Supreme Court in 2015. She'd been a legacy applicant. "I dreamt of going to UT ever since the second grade," Fisher said in 2012's statement. "My dad went there, my sister went there, and tons of friends and family, and it was a tradition I wanted to continue." The Supreme Court ultimately held UT's affirmative action programming, ruling that Fisher hadn't been the victim of discrimination. And that's the issue. If we're awarding pity spots in university because of supposed victimhood based on skin color or what have yous, then that's ridiculous because, one, how do you determine that someone is a victim of discrimination? Is it there specific evidence you can present, or are we just going based on generalizations of skin colors that people think are the case? Two, if it's skin color based, isn't the act of not selecting a person based on their skin color discriminatory, hence making that person a victim? I mean, it's kind of some circular logic that no one's thinking about, but it's there. Now, I don't know the specifics of this instance. I don't know her grades or her test scores. I don't have an application in front of me, so I can't make an accurate analysis. But if the author had a shred of journalistic prowess, not based on ideological thinking, she would, one, have all of that info ready and on hand, and two, be ready to present it, rather than assuming that it was merely legacy versus affirmative action, and I don't see any actual information here that supports or denies anything. But the real kicker here is that if white people do in fact have their own type of affirmative action based on legacy status, then it sucks ass, because Abigail Fisher is a legacy, and you've just disproved your own original point. Do you even... Logic, bro? Bergerson believes higher education institutions are rigged against people without resources. Not necessarily. There are ways that people can go into college if they are lacking resources, namely that monies. Take it from someone who knows all about applying to college. I did it all through my junior and senior years of high school. I'm kind of the expert in my household. The application process can be boiled down to four major things: test scores, GPA, essay, and application. Granted, there are a whole bunch of other things that go into it, but those are extras that set you apart, and you'd be a fool not to utilize them, but let's keep it simple. There are two tests that you take in the US, the SAT, the ACT. Typically, one of these tests runs you up about $60 depending on if you take the essay or not. So, when you inevitably take the test, and then later if you want to take a subsequent test after for super scoring purposes, there are ACT and SAT fee waivers that you can qualify for. Furthermore, also, when you take the SAT/ACT, both tests allow you to send your scores to 4 schools for free while you're registering. Now, if you meet any of this criteria, such as you are enrolled in or eligible for the federal fee and reduced price lunch program, you're enrolled in a federal, state, or local program that aids students from low-income families, your family receives public assistance, you live in public housing, a foster home, or are homeless, your household income falls below USDA levels for reduced price lunches, you qualify for an application waiver. As for college applications themselves, they can run you up about $60, $70, even $90 in some cases. But guess what? There are processes for application fee waivers for coalition, common, and universal applications according to the College Board. I'm not making this up, I swear to God. As for your transcripts, which include your GPA, Parchment.com will electronically send out your transcripts for free for college and high school students. As for your essay, you need to write that one, no charge, for your own mental processes. I'm sorry, no one can write it for you. But as far as editing goes, there are editors online. For instance, Grammarly, it has a free trial format that actually works very well. I used it when I was applying to college. Other than that, there are your teachers, who I am sure, if you asked, would be happy to proofread your essay for you. It's also free to send it through whatever application site you use. Or perhaps you're talking about the actual act of paying for college, because, well, let's be honest, it's expensive. Believe it or not, there are solutions for that as well. Now, if you get good enough grades and test scores, most, if not all, colleges will offer you merit scholarships. On top of that, there are literally hundreds of scholarships that you can apply for through the power of the online internet, interwebs, www, World Wide Web, on sites such as scholarship.com and fastweb.com. There's actually a list of them in the description that I linked you to. It only takes a little bit of effort to look for those scholarship applications and then jump through the necessary hoops to get those monies like a whore. Those hoops are essays, not dicks. And then on top of that, there's that thing that everyone and their mother looks at with dread throughout every single year of college and collectively groan at the approach of, because FAFSA. FAFSA will allow you to apply for grants and or loans, and yes, you have to do it every single year you are in college for if you want that monies. Honestly, I send this video to my brother every time he asks me to help him apply for college, because I swear to God, now, college takes resources to get in and to go through, but those resources are not just money. College is rigged more so against people without the good sense to make an effort than, say, people without money. Nothing more, nothing less. But the unfounded assumption in this article that white people have all of the money and have all the advantage in the US is really interesting to me, considering the number of white people below the poverty line in the US is the highest of all demographics at 25,659,922.
It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right!
But no one ever seems to be that keen on bringing up that issue when they're talking about adversity. Why don't you just come out and say it? You have no interest in helping people without resources. This is all about race to you guys. In other words, not the white applicants the Trump administration is reportedly seeking to protect. That's a problem, he said, considering college is believed to be a gateway to the middle class. Closing the gateway only serves to perpetuate a system of gross inequality. For that reason, Bergerson maintains the legacy system should be abolished. I think legacy preference is something that its time has passed, he said. We live in a society today where every student should be evaluated based on their own experiences, their own capabilities, and what their goals are. Legacy stands in the way of that. The left needs to stop morally grandstanding on the backs of poverty-stricken people pretending to help them when they really just want certain people of skin colors or other to get a leg up over others. Furthermore, you cannot take an issue based on race, like affirmative action, and compare it to one based on money, like legacy, to distract us from how racist affirmative action actually is. That's all this is, a distraction tactic. And what's ironic is that in this article, they even argued in favor of abolishing affirmative action at the same time as they were trying to pin legacy as discriminatory. Remember when they said it was a little bit disappointing because there were at the time other kids we thought should really get in on the merits and they did not. At the end of the day, race doesn't and shouldn't matter. Gender shouldn't matter. Money shouldn't matter either. Class certainly shouldn't matter. Merit, that's what should matter. It's all that should matter. And now that I've explained to you how entirely pricey college is, I will take this opportunity to shill my Patreon and inform you that I went and had a lovely time dicking around on Teespring, where you can now buy a t-shirt that says Daddy Weebo on it, or a mug of thine enemy's tears, etc., etc. If you guys would like to help support me and my channel through either of those means, I would be much obliged.